recent A24 podcast, TV showrunner Lee Sung-jin, professionally and affectionately known as Sonny Lee, was in conversation with the great writer and creator of The Sopranos, David Chase. When asked by Chase about the score for Season 2 of his award-winning Netflix series Beef, Lee said that there was a need for more score music this season because it dealt with the emotionally engaged and mutually invested relationships of its four main characters, and that you cared whether they ended up together or not. So for the Beef Season 2 score, Sonny turned to FINNEAS O'Connell because his music was, quote, so emotive and able to pull at your heartstrings elegantly and simply. I nodded in agreement when I heard this. After a string of hit albums and tracks deftly sculpting the stripped down and still sonorous music that has bolstered Billie Eilish's voice through her meteoric rise, FINNEAS has been able to translate his advanced fluency of pop song phrase into dexterous score music that pulsates through and around the drama on screen. That you could say the name FINNEAS and most people connected to the modern world would know who you're talking about put me a little on the back foot going into this. But as we spoke, I realized that despite a prodigious rise to global pop star status along with his sister Billie, FINNEAS is still a chill, down-to-earth dude, just as happy to discuss what he loves about movies and shows as any cinephile or pop culture enthusiast. FINNEAS has only just begun what I hope is a natural progression into more composing for TV and film, and he already has a sophisticated perspective on his craft. Let's find out. This is the FINNEAS Chat. Hey, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for taking time to talk to me.
Well, thanks for taking time to talk to me. I'm noticing you're more active these days on podcasts. Do you listen to a lot of podcasts? Are you an avid podcast listener?
I have gone through periods of listening to a lot of podcasts. I feel like I was like an early podcast listener. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The first podcast I could cite, the first two would be like when I was like in high school, I used to listen to the Rooster Teeth podcast.
Don't know that.
I used to listen to Jimmy Pardo's podcast a lot, and I liked both of those a lot. And then, yeah, I mean, it ebbs and flows, you know, to just say a thing that I'm sure is not an original critique. I think that one of the challenges, here I am guilty of doing it, is like, you know, oh, Willem Dafoe is promoting Poor Things. Like, okay, if you listen to, as I do, if you listen to like Smartless and Conan O'Brien and Armchair and Amy Poehler, it's like they all have Willem Dafoe on that week. So I actually have tried over the years as a guest to like I did Armchair when I had sort of like no excuse. Like they asked and I said yes. And
yeah,
you know, I think like that to me gave me an opportunity to like have conversations that I maybe wouldn't have had if I were just like buy my new solo album.
Right.
But you know, the short answer is I love podcasts, and I grew up listening to what I think was really the sort of grand precursor, which is Howard Stern. Like I grew up.
Of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Well, Steven Spielberg, I don't know if you noticed, was just on a podcast talking about 2001: Space Odyssey, and they asked him, so what do you think about this, you know, whole podcast era we're in? He's like, oh yeah, we're returning to radio. So that's basically what it is. It's like if you grew up listening to radio and people talking on, you know, on talk shows on the radio, that's kind of what we're doing now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, you know, one of my favorite podcasters, I don't know if you know her, Yasi Salik for Bandsplain. No?
I guess I don't. Oh, you know what? Let me cite Song Exploder. That's like another favorite podcast.
Yeah. Rishikesh Airway. Yeah, he was, I see your expression. You love that, right?
I think his production on that is so fantastic.
It is
such a good editor and interviewer.
Yeah, I agree. He was actually the first guest on this show.
All right.
So I was really psyched about that. Yeah, and Song Exploder is one of my favorites. Bandsplain is one of my favorites. Yasi Salek talks about bands in depth, deep dives. But she said something about podcasts recently that I wonder what your take is, because she said you can have a podcast about soundtracks and soundtrack music and recorded source songs, but podcasts about scores are boring. So I take issue with that. What do you think?
I don't know. We're going to have to see how not boring we can be for 40 minutes.
Exactly. Before jumping in here, I just wanted to ask you this because it was on my mind. Do you listen to scores independently?
Yes.
All the time?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, especially now that I'm sort of, trying to get better at scoring stuff all the time,
Yeah.
Much to learn from great scores. But also just music that I love, the Phantom Thread score is a collection of, I've seen Phantom Thread like 3 times, but I've listened to the score album 100 times, Social Network I've probably seen about 100 times, and I've listened to the score, maybe another 20, 30 times. But I love to listen to score albums, and it actually, in condensing and mixing and mastering and releasing this score album was like, I had goals, you know what I mean? I had sort of like things that drive me crazy about score albums that I wanted to avoid, things that I love about score albums that I wanted to embrace,
Mm-hmm.
So yes, is the short answer.
Yeah. What drives you crazy about score albums?
The thing that drives me crazy about score albums is when somewhere, okay, so like somebody in the comments is going to cite me, but I remember when Dune came out, which has music I love, finding that finding that took me forever, hard to find the actual moment where that actually happened. You know what I mean? I was like, and many of the tracks on the Dune soundtrack are 9.5 minutes long, right? So you're listening through it. There's no lyrics. Can't scrub based off second verse, third verse. And I'm forgetting what the name of the track actually is that has it, but call that shit Dune, baby. That's Dune.
Yeah.
Or call it Dune vocal theme or something. You know what I mean?
Not like Worms, Descend or
Worm
something.
Reprise Part 2 or whatever. and again, I don't mean to the disclaimer here is I love that soundtrack and I love those pieces of music. But again, I want to be findable for the audience,
Yeah. Yes, of course.
I think the way that I consume stuff instrumental music, right, score included, is to some degree based off of how much of it I already feel like I understand versus how much of it I'm mystified by. And if I'm mystified by something, I'm trying to sort of solve the riddle or the puzzle or whatever. So, if I'm hearing something that feels not like something that I've done exactly, but something that I feel like I have an understanding of, I think I understand how to get there, then that's interesting. And I'm sort of that's an interesting percussion layer here, a cool synth pad or whatever. And if I'm hearing some piece of music that I think how did they get to this place? Then I'm sort of, it's reminding me to think outside the box and to, think, oh, wow, anytime I see something that I'm if I were adhering to some made up rule, I wouldn't have thought to do that. And look at how effective that is. Because the new Mandalorian movie, by the way, this is a separate tangent. What's your relationship with, I don't love to listen to score albums before I've seen the movie.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, but I have broken that rule because I've been listening to the Mandalorian and Grogu soundtrack, and I haven't had a chance to see the movie yet. And the reason I've been listening to it is that some of the cues are like blowing up on TikTok.
Oh.
And they're crazy.
Okay.
And I was
who did that score?
Ludwig.
Oh, okay.
But I was like, what? I was like, what is this piece of music? And it's from that score. So I kind of like, I had to go check it out because I was hearing these amazing pieces of music and go check it out. But to use Ludwig as an example, like the main Mandalorian theme for the TV show that he did, 8 years ago or whatever it is now, 6 years ago, is so tight and is so like starts with this crazy like baritone flute thing and then goes into this like drummy guitar thing and then goes into this horn thing and then like busts open into this like big Star Wars horn strings. Like to me, like that is like that just listening to it and analyzing it and thinking about the chord structure and the tempos changing, like there's a month and a half worth of a college course for me in just sort of listening to that and thinking about how he got from A to B.
Duly noted. I will be checking that out. Yeah. It does lead me to this question, again, going back to something Spielberg said on the podcast, is about stealing. Like he was I find it interesting, like people who are so established as him is like being completely shameless about saying who he stole from. And he was talking about, blatantly stealing from Kubrick on that film. Like, do you...
Which film, Disclosure Day?
2001 Space Odyssey.
Got it.
Yeah, because Again, it is his Disclosure Day circuit that he's on right now for sure, is what you were mentioning. But do you worry about that, or are you also like, no, I steal from that, I make it and I do it my own way, and I have no qualms with that whatsoever?
I think I certainly am never interested in copying stuff. I'm always happy to cite inspirations. Similarly, I watched an interview with Zach Kreger recently when he was promoting Weapons, and he was like, this shot is inspired by this, and this is inspired by this. And like, I think that there's a kind of a sort of a respect paid to I would never have the ego to be like, this is all from nothing. You know what I mean? Like, of course I'm inspired by stuff. I think to sort of parallel like a director versus a composer, it's like, I would the analogy I would make is like, I'm not going to copy a melody. That would be like copying dialogue or something, Spielberg doesn't have like a scene in his movie that has the I'm sorry, I can't do that for you, Dave. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have the Hal scene.
Exactly.
He has like, stylistic similarities, whatever. So sure. Like, yes, if I hear a super beautiful romantic, like if I hear Phantom Thread, it makes me want to do beautiful lush string work. If I hear like a Ludwig score, it makes me inspired to do cool modular synth stuff with metric modulation. But yeah, I certainly would feel, and here's the other thing about melody, and this has always been true for me. I often think I am copying a melody, and then I have to go back and hear the melody that my melody is reminding me of, and it's like, it's different. Do you know what I mean? So I go like,
yes.
Oh no, this is the same melody from that kids movie I grew up watching. And then I go to I watch the whole kids movie, and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking of this melody, but it's not the same melody. It's just a feeling. It's just played delicately. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I'm maybe a little bit,
but it conjures.
Yeah, something. Which is of course the goal. But again, it's like I'm very careful about, I've had melodies that, and you know what? Here's the other real sort of moral of this is like, I'm always blown away when people talk about feeling like they're getting ripped off, because I'm like, well, but were they all your original ideas? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
You
didn't invent the chair.
Yeah. If I wrote a book that was like a true experience that I went through, like I had this thing happen to me and I met this person at this, bank, and they had this name, whatever. If I sort of wrote a autobiographical thing, and then somebody else wrote a very similar work that was not based off their real life, I'd be like, you copied my real life. But again, it's like to sit at a piano, which is like the same 88 keys that everybody has access to, and think that I am playing something for the very first time, and then to hear somebody else play something similar and think I've been ripped off. It's like, do you think that no one else played that before you? So
yeah, understood.
And I'll sing while you sleep. I'll cover your feet so they're out of reach. I'll breathe when you
And it kind of points to the temp scoring thing too, because like, I mean, have you encountered that a lot in your scoring
temping
so far, like where you're just like, they're giving you temp tracks and you're trying to come up with your own kind of variation of what's on the temp track? It's kind of, I know a lot of composers don't like temp for that reason, because they don't want to be influenced so directly by another piece of music.
I think that temp is scary as a composer.
Yeah.
Because none of us want to copy something. And then also, it's intimidating enough, I think, to be watching a scene that was shot beautifully and acted beautifully and think, God, I have to write a piece of music that's going to live up to all of this hard work. That's intimidating enough. It's triple intimidating when you like listen to the temp music and it's like, Johan Johansson.
I know.
And you're like, bro, like,
come on.
Yeah, I'm not going to write a piece as good as Johan Johansson. When I did Disclaimer, it was all Bach.
Okay.
And I remember, like, I would write these pieces and he'd be like, it's not quite as good. And I was like, as good as Bach? Like,
I know.
Like, yeah, dude.
Bar is so high.
Like, how can we do, like, either go ahead and use Bach, or like, I'll do a different thing, I'll add some synths to this or something that was not part of his canon. But there were instances on every project I've worked on maybe where, like, here's what I try to do. If I'm working the picture, what I try to do is I don't listen to the temp. If I'm not with the filmmaker, like if we're not doing a spotting session, I don't listen to the temp. I watch the scene and I make a little thing. And then I unmute the temp and I see like what did the filmmaker like? And sometimes it's so at odds with what I've made that I think like, okay, well, I'll send this in, but I'm going to get a critique that's like, bro, like the temp was rhythmic, your thing was not. And then sometimes the temp is close, And I think, my piece is kind of the same, sort of emotional feeling as this, but the temp is a little bit slower than mine. I'll just slow mine down a little bit, and then, it'll feel like, even though I didn't make the piece inspired by the temp, I'm like, then now I'm sort of taking the note of like their piece a little dirgy and mine was a little fast. So that's kind of how I navigate it. I certainly try, and I succeeded on Beef in like plying them with music in the production stage. So they could temp a lot with my stuff. A lot of things where they were like, here's what, we temped this with your piece. And then I kind of was like being like, oh, well, cool. I'll now that I know what this scene is, I'll go back in and I'll add the sort of necessary dynamics to the piece that I had made blind. And so that was pretty dreamy. I think that's like, if I could choose how to work moving forward, I make a bunch of stuff while they're writing and shooting. And then when they get in the edit, they just sort of put my stuff in. Because here's the other thing. The worst part of temp is sometimes, especially like the first project or two, they temp a thing. You hear it and you think, geez, okay. And then you make a piece of music that you feel like, you're like, okay, like I think this helps the scene in the same way that this temp music helps the scene. And then you play it for the filmmaker and they're like, I didn't even really like. They're like I didn't even really like that the temp music had those drums in it, and you're like,
Why'd you give it to
bro,
me?
like, what about it did you like? And they're like, oh, I liked that it felt sad. And you're like,
Okay.
okay, but again, it's like that's where spotting sessions are so important, because you have to
Right.
sort of say to the filmmaker, like, what is it? What about this piece are you going for? If you love all of it, then that's going to be the hardest, because I'm going to have to beat it. But if you only love one part of it, if you go like, I don't like that it's super synth heavy, but I really like how much anxiety it gives me. It's like, well, then that's great, because then I can go off and do my own thing, and hopefully,
Absolutely.
whatever.
Speaking of beef, and speaking of cues that you might be intimidated by when you're first encountering them, or intimidated to write, your first task in beef, you had to write one cue that could run through like every single character that you were gonna encounter in the show, set up a whole kind of like storyline, and if I'm remembering correctly, the cue even extends into when Carey Mulligan and Oscar Isaac were fighting.
Yes, it's the first 10 minutes wall to wall.
Yeah, so really curious about how you approach that one, considering what we're talking about here, because you really have so much setup to do, and it's a long cue, and it's very long cue, and with that amount of responsibility and setting up an entire storyline, how did you approach that?
I mean, it took a long time. It was not dissimilar from, scoring a whole episode. And ultimately the way that I would make it work was like, I would pick moments in the 10 minutes that felt very significant. Obviously the sort of culmination of the fight scene felt incredibly significant to me. And so I would make like the right 30 seconds of music there, and then play that for Sonny and go like, does this feel like where we want to end up? And he'd say yes. And then you work backwards 2 minutes, and then you get to like, the scene on the tennis court of Austin and Ashley sort of sitting, staring lovingly into each other's eyes. And you think like, okay, is this little moment feel right for these characters? Yes. Okay, well then let's draw that out. Let's draw that forward. You kind of made these little, it's like dropping little droplets of ink on a piece of paper and letting them kind of like seep into each other. But it took forever, and I would have loved to do it last.
Yeah,
but we did it first. Going from nothing to something, it's so much more impactful than going from something to some more, So
yeah,
that first 10 minutes of like, okay, what does this show sound like and feel like? And, I think that the core thing that was challenging and I felt good about once we got on that 10 minutes is like, the synths, the super sort of arpeggiated Moog synths in that have a kind of a like, even though it's an old analog synth, it has a kind of a digital, serene feel, but it's playing kind of moody, dark things. And I think that sort of reflects the characters in totality this season. It's this kind of like, everything's fine. We're fine. We work at a country club and got to make sure that the grass is green and that it's cut and that it's watered and it's fine. And then like underneath that is this kind of like the anxiety that would accompany doing that job and working for these people. So I think that was a really fun part of the process.
things are roiling and simmering underneath.
Yes, exactly.
The exterior.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned White Lotus because it occurred to me, and in some ways you have a corresponding format with these two shows, and themes of conflict amidst kind of forced civility, stay intact, and those stay intact. The settings and the characters are revolving between the seasons of White Lotus.
Yeah.
But the central idea is intact. And I would say the same thing with Beef. I mean, between seasons 1 and 2, you do have that central idea of people trying to be civil or trying to conduct themselves in interactions of society, but they're going through so much underneath, and it's getting bottled up, and how that explodes at certain times, right?
Yeah, I think that the thesis that I would posit onto White Lotus is like the relationships people have with each other when they are not in their workplace, and then the relationship of the people who are working for the, luxury experience.
The institution. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And the kind of ugliness there. And I think that ironically, not to sort of out myself, I keep these thoughts to myself, but I go to Taco Bell and they hand me the bag and it's all completely not what I ordered. And I think like, that's okay. And I eat it anyway, or I like rebuy it or whatever. I go like, hey, my bad. Like, this might be somebody else. Like I am so chill about it. And I think that a large part of it is that it was, the cheapest meal I could buy. And then if you go to a really fancy restaurant and you're sitting at your table and the food comes out and you think, they fucking forgot the potatoes. I ordered potatoes and they forgot it. You're in your head, you get all worked up. And I think it's, it directly correlated to your awareness of how much money, you're paying for this experience, or how highly esteemed it is. And so I think that in the White Lotus of these hotel patrons and guests being so sort of small and, narcissistic is like if you're at the Four Seasons Sicily or whatever it is, it's like you've spent thousands and thousands to get there and to stay there, and your experience is very colored by this kind of like I don't know, I love that. And Sunny, to sort of talk about the theme of this season of Beef, and to I don't know how he would tie it into the first season, but I can imagine because I can do it. It's like he said that he was going to these country clubs that his friend was a member of right after season 1, and that the guests or the sort of members were all Gen X boomers, and that people working at the club were all millennial Gen Z. And he just sort of had this kind of vision of like, these Gen Z millennial people are never going to be members here. Like this kind of like, they're not going to they're not going to grow older and become Gen X and boomer and join this country club. Like, we are in a period of time financially as a society and as a country that is no longer a kind of a ladder you climb from one place to another, as we sort of were led to believe. And so I think that, to me, that's where both seasons, that's their kind of thesis to me, is like season 1 is like you have Ali Wong's character has tried to create this brand. She's trying desperately to sell it because she wants the, financial freedom. And Stephen Yoon's character is trying to build his parents a house and trying to, do these because there's no money. And you see in season 1 them kind of work for and interact with the older, established, wealthy people, and the kind of carelessness that promotes in them. And Sunny and I have talked gleefully about our international friends talking about the healthcare episode of this season.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Our Canadian friends or our European friends are like, you can't be serious. And we're like, oh, yeah. Like, I had an emergency room visit a few years ago that was very similar to this. Sunny wrote that episode almost entirely biographically. Like, I think,
oh, wow. Okay.
I think that, I think that this kind of, he said a thing recently that I'm going to just quote directly to you, where he basically was like, I think as long as the disparity is this great, there is going to have to be art made about it, and it's going to be part of what we discuss, and so it's going to have to be reflected in it, which I think is a great sort of, acknowledgement from him.
For sure. That was episode 4, right? With Ashley in the hospital.
That's right.
And I looked at it as kind of its own little mini opera. I mean,
right.
The way that it carries out, and culminating in that crazy LaRue In for the Kill remix, which I love the source selections at the ends of these episodes at times, and that was such a great one. But your music is kind of doing an operatic thing throughout that whole sequence, right? I mean,
I sure had fun making the music for those sequences. I think anything, there's a term in song structure that I've just learned, which is the terminal bridge, which is like you do a verse, you do a chorus, you do a verse, you do a chorus, you do a bridge, the bridge builds more, the song ends. Without knowing that term, I've done that like a dozen times. Like Billy and I love to do a terminal bridge.
Yeah.
And I think that to some degree, like one of the real joys of film scoring, TV scoring, is the kind of like playing with form. It's like the sequence that you're talking about of Austin running through the hospital as Ashley's about to be induced, or not induced, sorry, put under, she's about to be anesthetized. The structure of that piece just builds and 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 then ends. And I think that's a really fun way to sort of make music, is to just sort of take something from one place to another place. I think of sort of song structure as this kind of like circle thing. You start somewhere and you make your way around the sun and you get back to, to some degree where you started, kind of. And I have loved doing these film scores and being like, just going to do this 10-minute piece that goes crazy and then goes even crazier and then goes even crazier and then it's done.
When Lee Sung-jin wanted to approach you about this, again, we're talking about central themes kind of staying intact between seasons 1 and 2, but what did he tell you he saw in your production that was a right fit for this story, and also building off of, it's quite different from Bobby Krilich's treatment in season 1.
Yeah, which I love, by the way. I think his music in season 1 is awesome.
Yeah, what did you take from his score, if anything, or what carried over, or what did he want you to kind of pay attention to about season 1, and what did he want you to just completely leave behind and ignore?
He never really brought up, I never heard him bring up season 1, as a reference point, almost ever. Maybe sometimes for a shot or something. And I think that, I looked at it as, the same way I might look at a filmmaker like Ryan Coogler or Paul Thomas Anderson or something, of like, oh, I loved that filmmaker's last thing and I'd love to be a part of their next thing, and to some degree, I know that Sonny is an appreciator of Billy's music, and I think that's 100% how I got the job. And I think that I often relish working with people who made something that I love, and just sort of knowing that they're making something that I'm a part of now, working with filmmakers or whatever. So yeah, we didn't really reference season 1. I think that what I said to him very early on, like, why is it not just Bobby? And he said, well, it's nobody else is the same, right? It's a totally different cast, and it's, a totally different feeling of a world, even down to the art direction of the title cards, right? Like everything is different. And he was like, Bobby's score is great. And he was like, and, I'd have to ask him to reinvent the wheel on this and start all over. And so, I think it also instilled in me a feeling of like, oh, if there's ever a season 3 of Beef, it'll be, I'll pass the torch. Somebody else will do it probably, which seems appropriate. I think what Bobby did perfectly that I had to find other ways of accomplishing, and hopefully I did an okay job, was like, it just is so stressful. Like, I think Bobby's music was so anxiety inducing, and so I didn't want to lose that awesome quality.
Right. But you achieved that in your own way, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if I was like, the thing that would have made me feel the worst is if somebody was like, oh, he just ripped off, Bobby's score, and that would have made me feel terribly.
Of course. Now, were you a fan of Bobby's, like back to his like early days of recording, like Hacks and Cloak days? Are you on board?
I got into all of that in my sort of exploration into sort of, that's been a part of yes. The short answer is no, and then I go back, right? So I watch season 1 and I think this is cool, and I listen to the music, and then I go back. I've just done a lot of that with Jerskin Fendrix.
Oh,
like black hair from his early albums and stuff, and like, I don't know, that's super fun to me too.
Yeah, it is. I love connecting those dots.
And again, it's like I wouldn't have heard that Jerskin record if I hadn't been like loving the music for Poor Things or Begonia or something. And,
of course,
what else does this person have? And
yeah. Well, that early stuff of his, Hacks and Cloak stuff, it's so dark and brooding and intense in its own way, and it's almost like a score for a Robert Eggers film. Like in fact, I can't believe that he hasn't scored a Robert Eggers film at this point.
Maybe he'll do Werewolf.
Yeah, maybe, right. But yeah, no, I was curious to know if, because I've been a long time fan of Bobby's from those early Triangle record days, and I always love to see the evolution of a recording artist going into scoring and what they come up with. You mentioned, Moog synth and things like that for this score. You've probably been told this, but I couldn't help but getting some Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein kind of Stranger Things vibes going on in this. I know it's a lazy comparison, and it's definitely overstated.
Well, I mean, the score for especially season 1, I want to sit down with those guys and ask them what doing 5 seasons of Stranger Things, and you know what I mean? Like, the new season alone is like 3 hours of music or something.
Yeah.
But man, the first season, that music was so fresh and inspiring to me. And I think that it's very important to me always to acknowledge the reference point, because it helps you understand the differences and the similarities. And I think what they were able to do with that score and imbue the music with is this supernatural quality. You know what I mean? It really does go to a sci-fi place musically.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of one of the things that I very purposefully was like, okay, there are no superpowers in the Beef world. There are big, harsh consequences for your actions.
Yeah.
So that was like the kind of first ingredient that I was trying to remove. And again, that's not a button on a synth. It's just a kind of a composition quality. But I was like, okay, like this music, which is so sick for like a monster. Like, how do we, use this same synthesizer but have it, played just for a very powerful Korean woman,
Sure. Yeah. But also what I noticed is, before you kick into like the the upside down and the horror aspects of Stranger Things, you get these, and it's sequenced like this in the score. You get these really lovely kind of warmer cues.
Yeah, the kids cue in Stranger Things is a beautiful piece of music.
Right? Yeah, I agree so much, and like friendship and a kiss. Incidentally, your piece titled "The Kiss."
Oh, from
the Fallout.
The Fallout, yeah.
That's such a beautiful piece of music.
Man.
Like on its own. I had lumps in my throat actually listening to that.
That movie is great. That was one of the things that I maybe didn't even sort of, I was so focused on not doing a bad job that I wasn't like sort of internalizing like, wow, the first thing I'm getting asked to score is great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was too busy being like, oh my God, I'm going to suck. But I'm so lucky that, Megan asked me to do that film. I love that movie.
Yeah.
And I loved her follow-up. I loved My Old Ass. I'm excited to see this TV show she's doing.
So I haven't seen My Old Ass. What's the TV show?
I don't know the name, but I know she's
okay.
up in Canada shooting a TV show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, there's only 10 cues on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of like very select places where the score comes in that film.
Yeah.
And a lot of source music. But again, this kind of thermal modular low end thing that Kyle and Michael achieve in Stranger Things, I feel like you touch on that in some places, and those are some of my favorite pieces from you. Like, for instance, no matter where you stand on Oscars and Carrie's characters in the show, and how much disdain and contempt you've built up for them over the course of the season, when they're sharing their divorce papers, you feel for them. You feel for both of them, and your cue really swept in and accentuated that in a really evocative way, I felt like.
Thanks, man. I think that was, the fun part about being on the creative team in the post-production world. Obviously, mostly in life, we just watch stuff, and sort of being part of the kind of arm of like, how is this going to feel? I think that to me, like the relativity of everything is like, yeah, we know that these characters are like, in some ways deeply, wrong for each other or have treated each other very poorly. But here they are showing each other a lot of love and sort of understanding that they have shared this huge portion of their lives. And, I think that to me, that had to be the sort of first step of, right in episode 6, he like smokes toad venom or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And she's talking to Ashley, and you can see that they're kind of like coming to terms with their conclusion of their relationship. And then in episode 7, he's like, I'm just gonna do right by you, and we can move on. And she gets on her flight, and she is reflecting on his sort of kind gesture. And then in episode 8, he does try to come and save them all, and he kind of fucks it all up in the process, but he does ultimately take the fall for her. And I think that they're very imperfect, sort of his version of like, showing that he loves her is still a big sacrifice, right? The two scenes where he's saying I love you are him saying like, I've signed the divorce paper, you can have everything, and then him sort of saying like, I'll go to prison for this and you can be free, which is a very loving thing. So I think we had to make sure that the music felt reflective of like the intention there. If you were reading a transcript of it, that's one thing, but the intention is very pure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to follow an arc, right? In these shows. That's the thing about a television show, is that there's more of I feel like there's more of an arc that you follow across many episodes that culminates in kind of these moments like that. I'd like to sneak in one more question,
Sure.
if that's okay. So I try not to read or listen to interviews about subjects I talk to.
Sure.
But I couldn't help but listen to what?
I'm curious what you couldn't help listening to.
Well,
I'm excited.
Fresh Air.
With Terry Gross?
With Terry Gross, yeah. I've always listened to that show, and I couldn't help but listen to your episode with Billy and Terry, and like with everybody she speaks with, I really thought she got you guys to open up in some really revealing ways and lovely ways. So, she asked Billy about kind of developing more of a confidence and a range in her vocals, like over the course of her recording from the first album to now, and how that, needed to just gradually develop on its own. And it made me think of your production and the passage of your production and the evolution of your production from the beginning to now. And it sounds like you got a lot of encouragement. That's what you alluded to, that people were, you might have had an imposter syndrome about, I don't know if I can do this. But you had people like Billy and other people in your life saying, no, this is good, man. Like, you should keep doing this.
This is true.
Yeah. But it made me think, in this world of scoring, all you ever hear is, nope, that's not it. Can I get a version B? Can I get a version C? No, that's not at all what I wanted. Can you go back to the drawing board?
Yeah.
I mean,
100%.
Right? So, like, it flies in the face of what kind of encouraged you to keep going in the beginning. And now in this particular context of making music, you're always being confronted with, no, that's not it.
Yeah, I mean, they're very different from each other, and they're both good for me. The thing I assume I was talking about on Fresh Air, which I've thought a lot about, is like, from my earliest memories of like downloading Logic Pro and starting to try to produce stuff. It's like my friend Frank being like, you're going to produce some music for me. And me being like, in my head, like, I'm not good enough to do that. And then sitting at a keyboard and making some beat and him being like, this is the best beat in the world. And me being like,
is it?
Wow. And it's like you do kind of, because you're internally like, no, it isn't. This sucks. I'm terrible. And it's like, you do need that person just sort of telling you that it's good enough for them. And so that I credit with sort of giving me the confidence to continue to get better and better. And then the scoring thing is similarly good for you. I think that one of the worst parts about creating things is preciousness. I don't think preciousness is helpful at all. And I think that on my worst day, I might be a little bit like, I don't know if this is the best thing I've ever made, and it's like, what an egocentric, way to sort of make something. And the best part about doing the music for a show is like, I mean, I have specific examples of like turning in pieces of music and being like, they're going to love this. And then turning in pieces of music and being like, the deadline is today. I don't even know if it's good at all, but ding ding, here's the deadline, here's the piece. Yeah. And like I have not only on this project but on other projects, like where like the opposite turns out to be the case, right? The thing I was sure they would love, they're like, yeah, it's okay, but it's not doing its job. And then the piece that I was like, I don't even think this is good, they're like, this is exactly what we wanted. And it's like, what a gift to sort of get you out of your own way.
Yeah.
Deadlines are great. The kind of plasticity it gives you. You make a piece and they say, I like everything except the kick drum. And you think, the kick drum's the best part. But you don't say that because you don't want to get fired. And so you go like, no problem. And you take it out. Yeah. It's really great.
Yeah.
And I think like, I'll keep wanting to score stuff as long as I keep learning as much stuff as I feel like I do on these shows.
So are you? What's next for you? Are you?
I'm gonna do another. I'm gonna do a movie next, and I'm not allowed to say what it is, but I'm excited.
Right. Amazing. Well, I'm excited too. This has been such a thrill to kind of go back over your music and Billie Eilish's records, and with the view to kind of what you're doing in the scoring world, which, you know, you're kind of still in the beginning stages. It seems like in what could be hopefully a long career of that. So I'm excited to see what comes next.
Thanks for your time and for, you know, helping to validate to some degree my film scoring hobby. I appreciate you.
Yes, we're advocates of the scoring world, and hopefully Yassi Salik is wrong and talking about score pieces isn't boring. So, you send this episode to Yassi as I will
example.
All right.
You know, I'm sure on a bad day I could bore somebody, but hopefully it's fine.
Well, it's been great to talk to you, Phineas. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for yours. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.